Hey, good morning, everybody. Good afternoon if you're in the East Coast or another part of the world. Let's give it another couple of minutes. People are joining now, and then we can get started in a minute or so. So if you just joined, we're still waiting for people to join. Just giving it another minute. So you can ask us questions through the webinar. There are some links to the side of the webinar where you should be able to ask us questions. So keep your questions coming. As we're talking through the slides, we will get to the Q&A part towards the end of the presentation. In about another 10 seconds, I'm going to get started. Are you guys getting an echo? I'm getting someone saying they're getting an echo from my voice.
Might as well chime in here too and see if it is just on you or if it's everyone that is talking in here. Is it just one person echo, or do we have both people that are still hard to hear?
Okay. Yeah. I don't think anyone is getting an echo. Anyone else is getting an echo? Okay, I'm getting some pings saying they're fine. Please let us know if you're getting an echo. Please just put it in the question section, and we will see how we can sort it out. But let's get started. No echo at my end. That's good. Interesting. Looks like some people are getting an echo and some are not. I don't know what we can do about it. Why don't we get started, and if the echo is really bad, maybe you can try to disconnect and dial back again, whoever is getting an echo. And if it's still bad, please ping us and we'll see what we can do. But I'm gonna get started, guys. Hey, thank you so much for taking the time. Really appreciate it. This is one of probably many more to come tech talks that we're going to be doing with Google Cloud and our most strategic security partners. The goal of these tech talks and webinars are going to be to give you a much better understanding of the security posture that you can expect within Google Cloud, and how Google Cloud and the partners are coming together to give you the best experience and the best security posture that you might want when you're moving your applications. So today I have Alex from Dome9, and if you are looking at public cloud, you must know Dome9 pretty well. They are one of the hottest startups out there in the security space, and they specialize in really cool things like visualizing networks, network security, and compliance. And today, Alex is going to be talking to us about how to do network security and compliance best practices on Google Cloud Platform. So the way we are going to structure this is Alex is going to kick us off. He's going to share what they've been learning from customers using public cloud, and then he's going to hand it over to me. I'm going to talk about what Google thinks about security, and what our security posture is, and how we handle security within Google Cloud, and how we are exposing that to customers. And then Alex is going to come back and talk about the integration Dome9 has built with GCP, and then show a demo of their product running on Google Cloud. So with that, Alex, why don't you take us off and talk us through what you're hearing from customers?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Naresh. So, forward a slide. Is the slide moving over for you?
I am not able to move the slides.
Allison?
Are you? Are you able to move the slides?
Nope.
Interesting.
All right. Well, here let's mix this up then. At least until we figure that out, I will just pop up the. I'll pop this open on a presentation, and we will do it from here. Okay. Can we see? Oh, now it's. Apologies for the hiccups, everyone. Okay, looks like we can move slides now. All right, sorry for the hiccup. So hi, everybody. My name is Alex Corstorphine. I'm a sales engineer here with Dome9 Security. And so as Naresh mentioned, I'm going to give you just the very high-level overview of what Dome9 is and what we do and what we've been seeing and the challenges that we are trying to help you overcome. And then I'll come back in after Naresh finishes up his part, take a little bit deeper dive, show you guys the UI, and give you a better feeling for how this actually looks. So first of all, who is Dome9? So we're a SaaS platform for everything public cloud as far as infrastructure security goes. Our goal is to give you better visibility into the configurations and security configurations within your environment. And we were founded back in 2011. We're headquartered out here in Mountain View, California, and our engineering is all out in Tel Aviv. We have over 250 enterprise customers currently. And we've been working with Google Cloud publicly for the better part of this year. And it's really been a great partnership for us as we're seeing so many companies adopt Google Cloud and really embrace the benefits that they have to offer. But so with that, why Dome9? What do we do and what are we trying to solve? And it's really summed up well within this report that was ran by Cloud Security in 2017. And what they saw was that the top challenges that companies are really facing is all around getting better visibility into the security of your infrastructure, being able to keep it compliant, and then again, kind of tying back in those other two is really being able to set consistent policies across our different environments. When we have a tiny environment with just a couple instances and maybe one project, things are not as bad. But as we end up running these massive scale infrastructures that we're seeing our customers run with a ton of different instances and a ton of different services and running these across multiple projects, the complexity really just exponentially increases. And that's where we really come in to try to simplify that, to give you quick visibility across that entire environment. And then with that too, the challenges are not only around companies that are born in the cloud, but when we're trying to migrate from an on-premise type environment up to the cloud, there's even more challenges that are presented. And that's really not just around the configurations around what's going on within my Google environment, but then we're also potentially dealing with a lack of expertise and experience as a lot of these companies are running these cloud workloads for the first time. And so with that, this visibility challenge becomes even more significant, and the potential to have more misconfigurations and security vulnerabilities is even more prevalent. All right. So again, that was a very high level, but I'm going to hand it over to Naresh to talk about how Google has addressed this on their side and what they're doing to help you make sure that you stay compliant in the public cloud.
Awesome. All right. Thanks, Alex. Hey, so why don't we just kick off with a quick vote? I'd like to get a better understanding of how much you guys know Google Cloud and how much you've invested in Google Cloud, so I can, better understand how much time I need to focus on what portions of the presentation. So I just opened up a poll. If you can just take a quick second to give me some responses to this poll, that would be helpful, so we can focus on the things that actually matter. Do you see the poll?
I see the poll.
Okay. We're slowly starting to get some votes in. Let's see. So it looks like it's kind of between experimenting GCP and considering GCP or not considering GCP at this point. So I'm guessing the audience is not very aware of our cloud, our security story. So this definitely helps. I'm going to stop the poll now, and I do. This might be a redundant one, but I just want to understand, how much do you understand our security? There are lots of white papers out there that we've been publishing about security on Google Cloud. Have you had a chance to go through that? Okay. Oh, there's some very familiar people. Okay, this is helpful. I'm going to go back. All right, so let me just start off with what we think of cloud, right? Like, so cloud is not new. I think all of you know this. It's been around for decades, and first generation of cloud was all about co-location, and this is where you used to put your physical servers on a co-located data center, which is probably within 5 miles, so you can actually run to it. You're still responsible for managing that infrastructure. And then the second wave of cloud started with VMware coming out with virtualization, and this made it so much more easier to co-locate, right? Like, you just move your virtual machine wherever you want, lift and shift your workloads. But then you're still responsible for managing the workloads. You're still responsible for managing the applications and patching the applications and so on. And then the third wave of cloud is what we expect to really take on over the next 2 to 3 years, where customers stop worrying about compute. Like, you don't worry about networks, you don't worry about compute. All you want to do is run your applications and scale your applications. The whole story around serverless compute. And we think customers are still sort of in the second wave, kind of looking at third wave. Not really, there are customers like Snapchat who are completely built on serverless compute, but most majority of our customers are still looking at lift and shift workloads. And Google Cloud basically plays in wave 2 and wave 3 of compute, wave 2 and wave 3 of cloud. So if you look at the services that we offer, there are hundreds of services that we offer, but if you just have to bucket them into 3 broad buckets of services, you could look at them as application runtime services, or data services, or core infrastructure and operation services. So within application runtime services, you have App Engine, you have Cloud Functions, you have Kubernetes, GKE, Google Kubernetes Engine, Translate APIs, which is very API centric. And then on the data services, everything around data, right? So Cloud SQL, GCS, Google Cloud Storage, that is, BigQuery, Dataproc. These are some of the services that deal primarily with data and handling data. And then the last one is core infrastructure and operation services, which is things like Compute Engine, core networking services, Google machine learning engine, which is gives you access to raw TPU, where you can run your own models and train your models and so on. But the underlying thing that's underpinning all of these services is security, right? So whenever we build security, we want to make sure that it's kind of part of all of these services, and it's built to scale. So how did we learn about security? So I think if you look at the logos, I'm actually going to show this slide first because this is more relevant. So if you look at the logos on this slide, I think all of you would be able to understand what these logos are, like Google Search and YouTube and Maps, and all of these are billion-plus user services. And we've been super fortunate to have 8 billion-plus user services today. And everything that we've learned about security is based on our experience with these billion-plus user services. So based on that, how do we look at security, right? So there are 4 main categories of our approaches to our security, which is what you see in the slide. So there is defense in depth, and what we mean by defense in depth is instead of relying purely on network approach to putting a perimeter type security around the data center, we truly believe in strong authentication, right? So unique and strong authentication and authorization across users, across services, across code, across data, across machines, across devices. So put another way, we want to make sure that the right code runs on the right machines, that's authorized by the right identity, accessing the right kind of data, and in the right context. So identity is super important to how we look at security. The second thing is trust and transparency. So we don't want you to just believe that we are taking care of security. So you can go and test this on your own. You can get third-party verification, and you can, be comfortable. You can do pen testing, whatever it takes for you to feel comfortable about a security posture. The third thing is abstraction and automation. We try to automate everything that we can. And we are going to pass it on to you in terms of services that are purely fully automated and fully managed, so that your developers don't have to worry about building, taking care of the controls, and they focus on building the applications, and they are still able to enforce the controls that are necessary to keep your application secure. And the last thing is continuous innovation. And continuous innovation is exactly what it means. Like, we're constantly looking at security and building new capabilities around security, and in many cases, open sourcing those security services. So you don't have to worry about security capabilities and just absorb or consume some of the new innovations that we are bringing out. So talking of innovation, this is one slide that I love, all right? Like if you just, this is a timeline of all the different security innovation that Google has been driving, starting from 2004. The core underlying pin, the underlying thing that's pinning all of these different capabilities that we've been bringing out is the fact that openness is better than closed. And this is very important to us, right? Because we think openness is driving innovation. Openness drives adoption, and openness gives you freedom, right? Like you will be free to adopt services you want, and you can leave if you don't think those services are the right services for you. And if you look at some of the services that we've been bringing out, like safe browsing back in 2006, 2007 timeframe, Beyond Corp, which is something I spoke about, which is, how do you secure your data center without the perimeter-based security? It's a perimeterless security, which is starting to become a standard in enterprises, and a lot of the forward-thinking enterprises are starting to adopt the Beyond Corp architecture, which we open sourced. There's Project Zero, which is to look for zero-day vulnerabilities. There is the Vulnerability Rewards Program, which we did in 2010, and we still continue to do it. We've paid off about $5 million in bug bounties. But the theme here is that there is continuous innovation, and we open source as much as we can in terms of fuzzying, in terms of some of the open source tools around forensics, cross-site scripting, firing range, and so on. And you get the benefit of all of that as a customer. So if you look at the security layers within Google Cloud and all the Google services that we run internally and externally, like Gmail and G Suite and so on, these are the 9 different layers of security that we look at, all the way from hardware until the usage and the user itself. And some of these services, some of these capabilities you get out of the box when you're consuming SaaS services such as G Suite, like Drive and Gmail. But if you're consuming infrastructure as a service, there is still a huge responsibility on the customer's end to ensure that they have the right tools and processes to ensure that security across these layers are maintained. And I'll talk to that in a little bit and what it means. But if you take this exact same 9 layers and you map it across all the different traditional services, security services that one would have in the data center, you would basically map it out something like this, right? So on the hardware layer, everything is purpose-built. And the value of purpose-built is not only from a performance standpoint, which gives us much better performance than many of the other clouds out there, but also the fact that it's really hard for a threat actor to really to take control of these hardware, because these are purpose-built from chip to every other component of the hardware. And then going up, the hypervisors are hardened. All the operating system images that if you consume operating system images from from Google Cloud Launcher or from our console, all of those images are hardened images. Now you can bring your own images too, but you have the option of using hardened host images. Encryption at rest, logging, identity access. There are some services here that might apply to PaaS and SaaS, like DDoS mitigation. If you're running on App Engine, you get DDoS mitigation by out of the box. But if you're running on IaaS, you still have to have your own DDoS mitigation services. Same thing with WAF and IDS IPS solutions. If you're using some of the native services, SaaS services or PaaS services, you get all these capabilities together as a part of the platform itself. So what I'm going to do is, there are some of these layers that I want to spend a little bit more time, especially like storage and data protection is the topic that comes up a lot. And I just want to go a little deeper and help you understand how Google Cloud looks at storage and protecting data that you put in Google Cloud. So it's a multi-step process, right? Like first thing is we shard the data. And what sharding means is we take up the data, we break it up into smaller chunks, and we spread it across Google servers. And it's all authorized through ACLs. And then we take those individual pieces, we encrypt those pieces with data encryption keys, and then we wrap it with another key called key encryption keys. And all the data encryption key is stored in right next to the data, but the key encryption keys are stored in something called a key store. And this is the exact same key store that we use for all of the other core Google services. So it's not a separate key store that you get with Google Cloud. So the level of protection is insanely high. There's actually a really good white paper which goes into how Google protects data and how Google does encryption. It's a 10-page white paper which talks in detail about how you do it. But it's pretty intriguing to understand, what level of depth and how many layers of encryption we do. From an authorization standpoint, the data chunk is always, every time you access the keys, it's logged, and it has to go through identity checks, and there's a complete ACL authorization done. And then all the activities around requesting keys, rotation of keys, deleting keys, all of that is logged. So if you want to go understand what's been happening, you can go from a compliance standpoint, you can pull all that information and share it with auditors. The next thing is application security measures. I'm not going to get into as much detail into this, but this is most relevant if you're running on PaaS or consuming some of our SaaS services like G Suite. But typically we have a verification system. So every time there's a code that's written, it goes through a configuration system which knows which source code is running. We have peer reviews and security reviews. We do pen testing on that code, and then we also run that code through vulnerability scanners to make sure that it detects cross-site scripting, mixed content, mixed pinning, and so on. And then the last part is the management and operation. This kind of goes into how we ensure that at every stage of the operation, from deployment to monitoring, we are constantly protecting and ensuring that security is paramount to how we do things. So from a deployment standpoint, all the traffic is protected by TLS. We do cert pinnings to avoid man-in-the-middle attacks. And then if you're using PaaS services or SaaS services, it's built-in DDoS protection that comes out of the box. And then from an operations standpoint, the hypervisor is constantly monitored, it's patched, it's ensured that, if you're using some of our images, it's got the latest patches in it, so you don't have to worry about patching. And then from a physical security standpoint, there's, metal detectors, video surveillance equipment, and then, when component fails, it's passed through a performance test, and then if it's not meeting the performance test, it's removed and it's retired. And even the retirement process of hardware is pretty complicated, as in we first try to erase it with writing zeros, and if we can't still do it, we will completely destroy that. We will shred that into pieces, and then we will recycle that. So it just goes to show how important security is, both from data security as well as physical security is concerned. And should give you a good understanding of why Google is as secure, if not more secure than many data centers out there. I want to take a quick minute talking about the network itself. So I think Google's network is something that you've probably heard of. There's a whole bunch of fiber that Google runs. So if you look at this image, all the green pins are the data centers that we have today. All the blue pins are the data centers that are going to come up today. We've been spending about $30 billion over the last 3 years just in CapEx investment as it pertains to geo expansion. And it's only going to grow because cloud is a very strategic investment point for us. We have about 100 plus. I think the latest number is like 115 POPs right now. And all the blue lines that you see, these are all Google-owned fibers. So what this means is the performance is really, really good, and the latencies are much lower than what you would see when you're using third-party fiber to connect to the Google Cloud. Connect to a data center. And then VPCs. VPCs is a very interesting topic, and I think a lot of people would understand the value of VPC. Just four main things I want to talk about VPCs. First of all, our VPCs are global, meaning it stretches the region. So you could have the same VPC that's global, and you could be running VMs on different parts of the world, but sitting in the same VPC. That's very unique to how we run our network, and probably very unique to the cloud environment itself. So this gives you a lot of advantages as it pertains to delivering applications. Second thing is the VPC is shared VPC. What I mean by that is, let's say you have a bunch of application developers who are building applications. You could completely obfuscate all of the networking components from that application, and you could put all of that into a separate project, which is purely for network admins and security admins. So as an application developer, they don't have to worry about configuring the network, setting up security, and so on. They just worry about building their application and running their application. They have their own quotas, they have their own billing, they have their own IAM ownership. But when it comes to the network parts of it and configuring the network parts, it will be sitting in a shared VPC, which is only accessible to the network admins. So this gives a lot of flexibility and a shared responsibility between your network admins and the developers, and the network admins retain control of how the network is actually built and set up. Expandability, so you can expand your IP ranges and grow your IP ranges as your applications grow. And then the last part I want to talk about is the private access to Google managed services. So if you are using GCS or BigQuery or one of the other managed services, you can have private VPC access to those services. Compliance and audits. So you see a lot of logos here. So we do take compliance very seriously. We refresh our certification for ISO every 18 months. We also give you access to SOC 2, SOC 3 reports. SOC 3 report is actually public. SOC 2 report, if you want it, we can give it to you under NDA. And then we also comply with ISO and IEC standards. So what this means is we do not use your data for advertising, right? Like, that's probably one of the big concerns with Google. Because it's an ads company and we get bulk of our revenue through ads. We do not use your data for advertising. And the data that you entrust with, you can completely see how we manage that data and how you control that data. We also give you all the tools to delete and export the data. And then anytime there's an information request from third-party requesters, we have very strong policies and procedures around how we handle those and how we protect your data from third-party requests. So let's talk about shared security responsibility. I think most of you probably understand this, and what this means is, like, if you go back to the layers of security that I talked about, and if you look at what are the different types of services you could be consuming from Google Cloud, SaaS services, you're going to see that Google takes care of a whole bunch of those different security layers, right? Like all the way from hardware to the usage. You're still responsible for the content security, which is data and encryption of data and access to data. But then everything else is Google controlled. If you look at PaaS services like App Engine or some of the managed services like BigQuery, we still take care of a whole lot of the security layers associated with those services. When it comes to infrastructure as a service, that's where you as customers are going to be responsible for taking care of the security posture for a big chunk of those different security layers. And here's where partners come into picture. So if you look at this slide, the blues are all the services that Google offers out of the bat. You don't have to worry about these at all. Greens are all services that Google offers that you can consume to fortify your security posture. And then oranges are all where we have very strong partnerships, like with the partnership with Dome9 where we can help you with like compliance and certifications, for example, and CDNs, for example, where we have our own CDN. We also have a partner network CDN, which you can consume depending on the use cases that you're targeting. Same thing with DDoS. If you're consuming PaaS services, you can use our DDoS. If you're using infrastructure as a service, you can consume third-party DDoS and next-gen firewalls and so on. But the whole point around this slide is you can decide how you want to secure your cloud, and you can use our network of partners to design your security infrastructure, security architecture. This is basically how we look at our security portfolio, our partnership portfolio. We have partnerships across the board in data security, infrastructure security, logging and scanning, and user security. And these are some of the customers we have across the board in different verticals and different segments. So you can see customers in technology, in manufacturing, in consumer goods, and so on. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Alex. Alex, why don't you take it over from here and talk us through how Dome9 is looking at GCP and how you build the integration with GCP and what use cases you're targeting.
Absolutely. Thanks, Naresh. So what I'm going to do here, in the interest of time and actually getting you guys in front of the UI and seeing some of this content we want, is there's a couple slides I want to touch on here, but then we're going to dive right into this so we can see how it looks. And so the first thing is setting the stage around what Dome9 is as a platform. And the Dome9 solution overall is called the Dome9 ARC, which stands for Assess, Remediate, and Control. And we really have all three of those components comprising our platform, because it's not just around increasing visibility. It's not just around showing you problems that might be within your environment. But really, how do we take that a step further and really make this a solution that covers, as much of your environment as possible, and that we're not just showing you problems, but then we're also giving you the ability to remediate them as well. And so with that, what I'm mainly going to be talking about today is really around what we have here in yellow, which is really around how is my security configured. Within Google, we are not doing security groups as much as we were applying these different rules via tags, which is an interesting and new convention, which can be very powerful, but at the same time provides a new level of complexity that we need to be able to get in and quickly digest to understand what's going on. And with that segues into this slide here, which is that there's a very new challenge presented within the public cloud that people have not had to face in an on-premise environment, and that is, within this public cloud, we have the opportunity to be extremely secure and have everything locked down so tightly with things like microsegmentation, but at the same time, having more public exposure than is acceptable is so much easier to do than on-premise. On-premise, for us to go and to have accidental public exposure isn't really a thing, because we need to go and we need to configure our firewall wrong. We might need to go and physically move cables. But at the same time here, within this public cloud, public exposure is really only about one errant API call away. And so from that, just looking at our gateway and trying to say whether or not that is configured properly doesn't really give us the full picture that we need in order to understand whether or not this is okay and things are configured properly. And so for that is one of the main reasons that we have our feature called Clarity, to give you a visual representation of what's going on here, so that you can decide for yourself quickly how things are configured and whether or not that's okay. And so with that, what comprises the Dome9 ARC is three main components. And again, I'm going to touch mainly on the network security side of things. And so network security is all around understanding, again, what the configuration is of this network and getting better visibility into what is going on there. Additionally, we do have two other pillars. The first is IAM protection and IAM safety. And that's really because, just like we see within with misconfiguring security groups, we also have the opportunity to give people more permissions than they would normally have in an on-premise environment. And when we have a lot of people with very permissive rules, even if we're only giving them what they need to do their job, there's a whole nother set of challenges that presents there as far as vulnerabilities and ways for people to do things that maybe they shouldn't. And then the last is around compliance and governance. And when we talk about compliance and governance within Dome9, there's really two use cases that we're trying to address. And the first is what most people think about when we say compliance, and that is that our standard kind of security frameworks with PCI and HIPAA and things like that that we all know and work with on a day-to-day basis. But beyond that, what compliance is really addressing here is also just best practices. Whether or not your company has to adhere to PCI or anything like that, excuse me, there are still rules that you are trying to make sure your environment adheres to make sure that things are secure and that everything is locked down just the way that you want it to be. So quick slide here as far as some of our customers go. 3 different customers here that are all using particular components that I was just talking about. So Vanguard, they're really leveraging that, that network security side of things to get better visibility. Because once you end up in this 800 size instance environment, you know, whether or not you're on AWS, Google, it doesn't matter. The challenges that, that are presented at that type of scale are significant. All right, and then I love this slide because it really kind of breaks down what it is that we do and why this is special. The first thing is all around how we actually go and we set this up. Dome9, it's a SaaS-based solution, but beyond that, we are completely agentless. So for GCP, what we're going to do is we're going to set up a service account, and we're going to pull all that data straight over from that. And the benefits that that presents is really twofold. First of all, on your side, it's extremely easy to do. Setting up a service account is easy to set up. It really is actually only about 5 minutes. Lots of people like to say it, but on your side, as far as that initial setup, it actually is quick. But then additionally, what's even more exciting about this is that because we're pulling this information straight from the Google APIs, we know how this data is structured and we know what kind of information they are going to present to us. And so because of that, once you go and you link up your account, there's no other configuration that you need. We're going to be able to draw these things I'm about to show you all automatically because we know how this data is going to come in. Beyond that, yet again, it's not just around visibility, but also being able to test on compliance and things like that. And then because we're API-based and we're pulling this information straight across, it makes it a lot easier for us to not just pull information across from one cloud, but at the same time, what we're seeing is that people are really diversifying across multiple public clouds, and Dome9 can really be that hub to pull all of that information again, to not just give you the visibility into one network or one project or even one cloud, but then really across all of those different environments into one single spot. All right, here's kind of a slide of that. All right, so in the interest of time, I'm going to hop on over to the UI so you guys can actually see what I'm talking about here. All right, and so what we're seeing here is the initial landing page that you get when you log into Dome9. And what we really tried to do with this is not just make this a place to go as a kind of navigational springboard, but really also give you some initial information around what's going on with your environment. We can see here for some different compliance runs that were ran, how well our compliance is doing, not too great. You know, some different information around IAM, as well as an inventory that is giving us an aggregate count of what our count is across these different clouds and across these different projects. But again, as I mentioned, the best place to really go to see what is going on within your environment is within Clarity. And Clarity is all around giving you visibility into how the security groups and how the tags and all of those types of things are interacting within your environment. And so from here, I'm going to go and I drill into a specific network. And what Clarity does now is it's going to be analyzing all of the different instances within this environment, and it's going to be analyzing all of the rules, whether those rules are being applied via all targets or they're being sent to specific tags. It doesn't matter. But then from here, once Clarity has finished that analysis, what we get is this view where our instances have been categorized into one of three swim lanes here based on how permissive the rules are. And just to quickly segue here, why this is so exciting is because within the Google console, this is the kind of view we have. And this demo environment is reasonably small, but even,
Hey, do you think you can make the window bigger? It's kind of hard to see.
Yeah, I can do that.
Thank you. Sorry.
Yeah, no problem. And hope you guys will bear with me as I deal with a little more panning with this, but hopefully you can see it better now. So from here, looking at these instances, there is a lot of information that is provided to us by Google and that we can see within this environment. But at the same time, even at this scale, and then obviously as we grow, this challenge just becomes bigger, quickly digesting what the current state of any environment is and how secure it is and how exposed these different instances are to the public internet becomes a very significant challenge. And then especially because we're taking in these different security rules via tags, this becomes a whole nother challenge. And so for here, just looking at all of our network rules here, what we have is a bunch of different rules that are applying to a lot of different targets, and then they're opening up different IP ranges, and they're taking in traffic from other tags. And so again, this really is great from a microsegmentation standpoint if you have fantastic control over exactly how all of these tags and everything should be set up. But on an ongoing basis, if someone wants to quickly get in and decide whether or not things are secure and that people are doing things the way they should, this is a pretty significant challenge. And we see people, instead of pouring through the console, they're maintaining Excel spreadsheets to get this visibility. And it's tedious. There's human error that gets introduced. It takes a lot of time. And instead, this Clarity view is drawn automatically where I can quickly see how exposed these different instances are. And without any prior knowledge of the environment, I can quickly tell you what's exposed and what's not. And that's the thing, because within Clarity, it's not just around showing you problems and misconfigurations, but it's around giving you a better understanding of what's going on with this environment, whether or not there's a problem. So in this case, these different swim lanes obviously mean different things as far as our public internet exposure goes. So any instances that we see in the DMZ, they're here because they have one or more ports that are wide open to the public internet. And in this case, when I click on this particular instance, I can see there's one that has a combination of rules that is inheriting from the Bastion tag as well as prod. And then the aggregate of those two rules together leaves me with this list, in which case I can see that, again, the reason this is in the DMZ is because it is one or more ports that are wide open to the public internet. And in this case, we can see that it's SSH that's wide open. Now, if this actually is a Bastion host, as it seems to be here, this can very well be the expected behavior. But again, that's fine, because we don't need to have problems in order to use Clarity. It's just around understanding what's going on. As I move right, we end up with the effectively internal zone and internal zone. As you can imagine, anything in the internal zone is here because it only has rules that allow it to talk to other internal services, whether this is an internal IP or another internal instance. But then in the effectively internal swim lane, what we see here is that the rules that are being applied to these different instances, they say that we can take in traffic from the public internet. In this case, we can see that that notification US East here, it's taking in rules from the notification tag as well as prod. And the reason this is a little more permissive than just the internal zone is that 443 is wide open to the public internet. But the reason it's in this effectively internal swim lane is because even though the rule says that we can take in traffic from the public internet, we don't have a public IP associated with this instance. So we can theoretically take in traffic, but at the same time, we logically can't make it out. But we really break this out into this different swim lane because we're only one step away from being public. If a public IP gets attached to this, all of a sudden 443 is actually taking in traffic from the whole public internet. And so that's why we want to break it out across these different zones. From there too, we can also see that we have another instance that seems to be a Mongo database. And in this case, we really want to see all of our databases just in the internal zone. And so this could be one of those cases where we didn't really know what was going on in the environment, and maybe someone attached a tag to this instance that they shouldn't have, and things are more permissive than we want them to be. And so in this case, I can see that I have two rules here that are kind of contradictory to each other. The first says that 27017 is nice and locked down, and that would by itself put this in the internal zone. But again, we also have this red rule, and it says that 27017 is not locked down, and it's actually wide open to the public internet. And so what we can do from here is we can go and we can drill into this instance to get some better context around what's going on and decide what we need to do from here. And so in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on Open in Central. I'm just going to drill into context regarding that specific instance. And now from here, I can get this better breakdown of what's going on within these instances and decide what I need to do. In this case, I can see that I have 3 tags that I'm inheriting rules from. That's backup, Mongo, and prod. And then when we see how this is actually affecting our rules, we see that there's actually 3 different sources that we're pulling in rules from. There's actually nothing coming from prod, which is fine. We see we're pulling in some rules from Mongo, which seem to be those rules that are more locked down. But then additionally, we have this backup rule, which says that 27017, even nicely labeled for us, is wide open to the public internet. And so from this really kind of comes back to what we're talking about, which is that within Google, we have the ability to have everything nicely locked down and extremely secure. But at the same time, especially at scale, if someone makes one little change and applies a tag to somewhere that it shouldn't be, uncovering this misconfiguration and quickly identifying that's an issue and knowing what you need to do can be extremely challenging. And then because on top of that, we're also not only inheriting rules from tags, but then also we're inheriting rules from policies that are set up to apply to all targets. That's a whole another layer of visibility that we need to be able to bring together into one spot in order to understand what's going on. In this case, it looks like really all we need to do is we need to take this backup tag either off the instance or tighten up this backup rule. But either way, once we do that, what we'll be able to do is come back into Clarity and refresh this view to make sure that the configuration changes I made actually had the desired effect and that everything is just as secure as I would want it to be. All right. So from here, we're a little bit short on time, and I want to make sure that I leave enough time for Q&A. But I want to quickly touch on the compliance side of things just to give you a taste for what that might be and why you might want to use it. And so within the compliance engine, I have a bunch of pre-built content for GCP. But for this, what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at a bundle of rules, which is really around taking that same kind of thing that we were looking at within Clarity, but we're codifying them. Instead of going into Clarity and getting a picture that says that I have a database named Mongo something that has 27017 wide open, why don't we turn that into a rule, which we can then run across multiple projects to be able to then end up with a report, which I can take and quickly use to verify that across all of my different projects, things are configured the way I want them to be, so that then if there is an issue, we can quickly understand that and then go and configure it as needed. These reports are broken into two very high-level categories. Top half is where we're going to see our pass-fail ratio, how well different regions did against this compliance, things like that. And then when we go down here is where we can see the results of these different runs. And so for something like that Mongo rule I was talking about, I can see that Mongo is wide open, which is an issue. We saw 13 instances total in this environment, 3 that had a name like Mongo, and then one of them, which was our offending instance from earlier, is the one that is out of compliance. From here, this is great, and we can go and drill into this instance, which is going to give us that same contextual page that we saw from within Clarity to dig in a little further and decide what we need to do for this. As Naresh mentioned, I'm sure that this is not the last webinar we're going to do, and so going forward, what we can talk about, or if you guys would like to chat more offline, we can talk about how we can take this and really customize these rules to your environment to give you this more fine-grained coverage to make sure that we're not just giving the ability to test pre-canned rules against your environment, but also fine-tune it, because we recognize that every infrastructure is different and everyone has different things that are critical to them. So with that, I'm going to stop there. I think we have a couple Q&A questions that had come in. First of all, is how does Clarity work at scale? Obviously, as we mentioned here, this environment is a little bit smaller, and so things are nice when everything fits into one line. But if we end up with these larger environments that we're talking about, how does this work, and is this too unwieldy to get any information out of? And the answer is no. First of all, that view is broken out by network, and so if we have a bunch of different networks set up, that is going to give us a little bit more segmentation so that we can only see the affected instances for a particular network. Second of all, in a production environment, ideally what we're going to be seeing is that there aren't a huge number of different combinations of tags that are being applied. Categorically, what we see is that really we see different kind of pods of collections of tags that are being applied to instances for different workloads. And so with that, even if we have a large number of instances that we're covering, what's really only going to add volume to that view is if we have a large number of combinations of tags. And then the last thing is that the panning and zooming within this actually works very well. And because we especially, spend a lot of our time troubleshooting those effectively internal and D&Z type of configurations, zooming in and getting visibility just on those areas that you care the most about is pretty easy to do. All right, next one. How do we work with multi-cloud? Dome9, as I said, we've been working with GCP for the better part of this year, and we've really enjoyed the partnership. We additionally work with Azure and Google, which is great because, as I said, there are very few companies that we're seeing nowadays that are really just looking at one cloud, because no matter how much we like any one feature set, diversifying always ends up being a good thing to do. All right, another one. Do we support HITRUST? I believe that HITRUST is a part of HIPAA. Could be misspeaking there. What we have for pre-canned content is a lot of these network rules, and then we have some content for PCI, HIPAA, and CIS as well. With that, if there's any other framework that we want to give visibility into, that we might have content built for, what we can do is we can actually go and build out different rules for our environment, use this thing we have called the rule builder. And so with this, what we can do is we can actually go and build out rules for, for what other frameworks that we have, but in a very click-through sort of way. And so this is a very powerful feature because it gives you the ability to test and assert on your environment, not only for these best practices, but maybe other compliance frameworks that we don't have coverage for yet. But you can do this without having to write a pile of Ruby or JavaScript in order to give you that fine-grained control that you need over your environment. And with this too, that's also where we could say, VM instance where name equals Mongo should not have tags equals backup, or maybe we should only be running some golden images, or any of those sorts of things we can do from here to give you that deeper coverage. Cool. All right. Yeah.
I was just going to say, Alex, I really like the way you guys have a natural language-based policy clearing in the tool. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, thanks. We're very excited about it.
So 4 more minutes. So I think the best way, everybody, for you to get a better understanding of what Google Cloud and Dome9 is to get hands-on with it. I think as a part of the next steps, what we would love for you to do is, I think there's going to be an email that comes out to all the registrants. So there is some credits that both Dome9 and Google Cloud are offering. So we're giving $500 free GCP credits, and Dome9 is giving a few weeks or a few months free for you to play around with both of our services. So I would strongly encourage that you take this opportunity to kind of get some, test projects going on Google Cloud, play around with it, use Dome9 to visualize your networks, use Dome9 to test the compliance posture, and then, reach out to us if you have any questions. And this is the link where you can go do it, but you'll also get an email with a link to this page.
All right.
Anything else, Alex?
No, that's it for me.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for taking the time. This was, we enjoyed it. Hopefully you got something out of it too. And hoping that you will take the opportunity to get some workloads on GCP and play around with it and try out Dome9 on those workloads, and come back to us with questions. Thank you so much again. Thanks for taking the time. Until next time. Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Thanks, guys.